Welcome to yet another episode of Frankly Speaking. We're talking about India being the fastest growing economy. We're creating large number of opportunities, both employment as well as entrepreneurial opportunities for our young, which of course we've been touting as the big demographic dividend. Is there also a bit of a difference in speed, if you will, between the aspirations of our youth and of course the ability to produce meaningful and sustainable jobs and employment opportunities for the young? It's not just about exams and the future of the students, but also more importantly, it's also coming at a time when there is fear around AI and AI taking away jobs. So let's talk about this with somebody who's been championing not just music, but sustainability, environment. He's a UN brand ambassador, 3-time Grammy winner. Ricky Kej, thank you and welcome to Frankly Speaking.
No, thank you. It's the first time that both of us are sitting down and having a conversation, so I'm really grateful for that.
So what's keeping Ricky Kej busy these days? We know you wear multiple hats. You are a composer, you're a Grammy winner, you're a UN brand ambassador, you're an environmentalist yourself. What's keeping you busy these days?
So making new music, performing all over the world. I just came back from a multi-city tour in China, and that was very interesting because the government of China had invited me as a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador to study the rangelands and the pastoral lands and the massive restoration projects that they're carrying out in Inner Mongolia, which is sort of like on the northern border of China. So it was very interesting to check that out. Also went to Kenya for the Land and Desertification Day, which was very interesting, and got to meet the Deputy President over there and discuss issues regarding land and desertification, which is a problem that all of us are facing right now. So this is what I've been doing: a lot of music, a lot of traveling, and a lot of understanding.
You've talked about this before as well, about how your journey as a musician
Correct.
evolved, and I think it was around 2013-14 where you made that switch from
Yes.
being, let's say, a commercial musician
Correct.
to talking about this intersection between environment, sustainability, and using music as a vehicle for spreading awareness. Do you remember that moment when it was it like a light bulb moment for you? I mean, how did it?
It happened actually over a period of time. It started off because I used to do a lot of commercials for television and radio, and that's how I used to make my income. And then it sort of like dawned on me that these big brands have understood the power of music to sell products, because they're always trying to sell something.
Correct.
And there were so many things that I felt strongly about, about the environment, about sustainability, about climate change. And I decided that, I need to create more and more music on this, on topics that I feel strongly about, because music is such a beautiful language for communication. And then when I won my first Grammy Award in 2015, that is Winds of Samsara, I had this beautiful meeting with Prime Minister Modi when he was going to be visiting the climate change conference, coincidentally a few months after that. And that is when he had actually inspired me that you feel so strongly about these topics, why don't you stop all forms of music and just focus on this for the rest of your life? And so when the Prime Minister gives you career advice, you tend to take it a little seriously.
So the fact that you've now become what I call an environmental musician is in part thanks to the advice that you got from the Prime Minister.
Definitely. At least I got the courage to do it because of him.
But tell me, Ricky, I mean, there obviously would have been commercial considerations,
Yes.
right? Because, I mean, you were making music because it was a livelihood, right? And then you made that switch. And weren't you worried, the money's going to dry up? I mean, how are you going to sustain a career out of this and so on? Or did that thought not cross at all?
No, of course. That's the reason why I took so long to actually jump into that decision. But nevertheless, as I said, once the inspiration came from the Prime Minister, that's when I decided to just jump into the deep end of the swimming pool and see what happens. And surprisingly, my career thrived after that.
Yeah.
And people loved the kind of music that I was making after that, because it came from a position of honesty. And it was basically every single piece of music that I would make was a piece of me and a piece of my mind. And I'm so glad that happened in 2015, because all the way from 2015 to now, you listen to any piece of music that I've made during this period, it'll be an accurate description of what kind of a person I was during that time.
Okay.
Because every piece of music is a part of me now.
So you also said this in the past that, though you've not formally, qualified or went to college to study music, you actually went to college to study dental. You're a BDS. Should I call you Dr. Ricky Kej? But tell us, how did that happen? I mean, the fact that your education was in something completely different, and then your career is in something completely different.
So yeah, there was never any doubt in my mind that I'm going to be a professional musician for the rest of my life, and this was from a very young age.
Okay.
My parents knew that I'm going to be a musician, but they had not articulated it in their head that I wanted to make it a profession. They always felt that he's going to be like an engineer or a doctor or something like that, and music is going to remain a hobby. But after my 12th grade, when I told my father that that I wanted music to be a profession, he was absolutely furious. So then,
what do you remember the conversation?
Yeah, he was absolutely furious, and there was a lot of drama at home. There were threats of me leaving home and all of that stuff, and it carried on for a couple of months. Then finally, my father and I reached a compromise that I would finish off a degree in dental surgery, and once I get that degree, then he will never question me again for any decision that I ever make in my life. So I went to 5 years of college. At the end of 5 years, I did not know anything about dentistry, but I got a degree.
How did you manage that?
That's a story for another interview, a long interview.
So you've never practiced?
No, I did not practice even for a single day. And but I got my degree. I got my license to practice. I gifted that to my father, and I told him that I'm not going to practice even for a single day. Now, coming back to your question itself, during dentistry, I started taking a formal education in music.
Oh, okay.
So I was taking a distance education course in music, in Hindustani classical and in Western classical.
Okay.
So and I thought that was absolutely necessary to sidestep any potential handicaps that I would feel later on in my career as a professional musician. So yeah, so basically that. And then after I finished my dentistry, after I gifted the certificate to my father, as they say, there was no looking back. And then I became a full-time musician, and my father stayed true to his word. He's never questioned me ever.
And then when you won your first big accolade, let's say when you won your first Grammy, did your father say that, maybe I shouldn't have pushed you into dentistry? Or
not really, but a lot of people, they say that their parents are not supportive. Even me, my parents were not supportive at all of my musical career. But the advantage that I had, if I have to be candid with you, and I think this is probably the first time I'm saying this, but if I have to be completely candid, they had money, and even though I never took any money from them, at least I knew there was that safety net, and I could make all of these decisions in my musical career, which were potentially risky, because I knew that worst upon worst, I can just go to my parents and I can cry,
Yeah.
So that was a gift that they gave me, and I'll always be grateful to them for providing that safety net.
Did you have like a window or something? In 3 years, let's say if this is not working out, then I go back and do the family business or whatever it is.
No, luckily I did not have that, simply because by the time I was in my 3rd year of dentistry, I'd already built my own audio recording studio with my own money. So I was already quite successful as a musician by the time I had finished off my dentistry. So I would go to college at 9 o'clock in the morning, come back home at about 5 o'clock, then from 6 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning, I would be in a studio recording. So I had a very, very busy and a very stressful schedule, but nevertheless, I became quite successful at music even before I finished off my dental degree, which gave a lot of confidence to my parents. But one more thing I wanted to mention, that even after I've won the Grammys, and when we go to family events like weddings, a relative walks to us from really far away and says that, Ricky, I love your music, and congratulations on this and that. And my father comes in and he's like, "Par ye doctor bhi hai."
Is it an Indian family thing that there's so much premium on education that you have to be either a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or professionally qualified in some form or fashion? And then, frankly, you have a career for the next 40 years of your life, right? You have an active career for the next 40 years of your life. And many times, what you studied is not what you end up doing in life. And, that mismatch, is that because we are accustomed traditionally in Indian families that we have to have a doctor beta or an engineer beta? It doesn't matter what he ends up doing in life.
I guess in Indian families, at least my father's generation, everything is based on fear, fear of failing, fear of not getting married into a good family, fear of what will they tell their relatives as to what their child does for a living. All of this fear is what they base their decisions for their children on. Whereas it needs to be more on passion. Because even being a musician, I believe that, just being a musician is not enough nowadays. You need to be 3 things. You need to be a musician, you need to be an entrepreneur, and you need to be a leader. An entrepreneur because you're constantly selling something, and that is yourself. And a leader because music is not an isolated job. You have to work with filmmakers, you have to work with orchestras, with with record labels, with marketing professionals, social media managers. You have to work with so many people. So you have to have that leadership skills. So I believe that if you're forced into a profession that you don't like, you can fail at that.
Yeah.
You know, and so you would rather fail at something that you love doing, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And nowadays with AI, as you mentioned earlier, you know, you can fail at any job that you do because AI can take that over. So may as well, at least in today's time, just do something that you love doing.
I want to come to that AI part because obviously, you know, a lot of young people are concerned about AI taking away jobs, even in a field like music, right? It's all about creativity. It's all about your individual spark and brilliance and so on.
Absolutely.
People are saying AI can make better music than humans do. How worried are you about that?
So AI is making some really, really high quality music and music that is quite emotional and really touches the heart, because people say sometimes that, you know, AI cannot make music that is, you know, that touches the human heart. But I've heard music where I did not even know it was AI, and me having such a discerning ear, I did not even know that it was AI, and I thought it was beautiful music, and then later on I realized that it is artificial intelligence. So technology has always been there in music. In the early 2000s, we had virtual instruments where you could get the sound of a violin using a computer, the sound of a guitar, sound of a flute. And these sounds were so amazing that, again, a discerning ear could not make out the difference between a real instrument and a virtual instrument. Everybody were up in arms against it, saying that people are going to lose jobs, and you know, the music industry is going to collapse, and nobody's going to have any work. But then the opposite happened. Musicians thrived because the only people who would use that technology were people who could anyway not afford to have musicians in their compositions, or people who use them as sketch pads. And let's say let's assume that I've never met an oud player in my life.
Okay.
So I could use that virtual instrument, see how the oud sounds, and then I could actually spend the money and call a real oud player. That's what it did.
But tell me, I mean, again, look, I'm completely you know, illiterate when it comes to, you know, music and making music. But at least back then, you needed a composer to put all of this together.
That's what I'm coming to. That's what I'm coming to. So the thing is that, so basically, composers started working with more and more musicians, and that's what happened. So technology became a tool rather than taking over jobs. Now, it's the same with AI. Now, what has happened with AI is that it's very easy to come up with and generate music, but it is always based on past precedents.
Okay.
Because you have to prompt AI, and it is based on machine learning and past precedents. Now, it is an opportunity for all of us musicians to pull up our socks and create brand new styles of music and ideas of music which do not have any past precedents and which are completely fresh. Like, I'll give you an example, Ludwig Göransson and the Oppenheimer soundtrack. It used a traditional instrument like the violin as the main instrument, but the way it was bowed, the way it was played, the texture of the violin instrument, the playing, was completely different, and it had no precedence.
So you're saying that kind of music AI can never create?
It cannot create, because how will AI have any precedence to actually copy, to actually create that music? So same thing with what Ludwig Göransson did with the Oppenheimer soundtrack, where it's completely brand new instruments and newer sounds, newer textures. So I believe that it's an opportunity for all of us to actually, innovate when it comes to music and make every single piece of music absolutely amazing, rather than creating quantity, create quality, because let the quantity part be taken over by AI. Like, one example I'll give you is that if I'm a filmmaker and I'm making a generic horror movie and I want generic horror music, I'll go to AI, because every time I want an option, it'll take me 30 seconds rather than 5 days with a human composer. Or if I want generic comedy music just as a backing for my film, then I'll go to AI. But if I want something without any precedence, something that is absolutely creative, something that has never been done before, then I will go to a human composer.
So basically what you're saying is, and I'd like to extend this beyond music, is that if you have something unique, which, you know, has not been done before, then that is something that AI cannot replicate, because AI depends on past models or uses past models to develop something new. But if, let's say, for inventors or scientists who are discovering something new, this is a great time to be, because AI cannot replicate what they are doing?
I do not know much about the science field, but I would assume that what you're saying is right, because anything without past precedents, anything that you're doing to innovate and to move and to propel the human species forward, I think it's a great time for such people.
So let me go back to the music example, because it's your field. When, let's say, Michael Jackson came onto the scene, and they said, you know, his sound itself is different. We've not heard something like this before, right? So the future of your industry is creating newer Michael Jacksons, newer people who are sort of pushing the envelope, breaking the frontier, rather than people who are creating the sounds of yesteryear, the sounds of, you know.
Absolutely, because people who are building on sounds that already exist, AI is doing that much better. So I would say that you would have to have a very innovative artist like what you mentioned as when Michael Jackson started, but at the same time that person needs to constantly reinvent themselves. So it's not like you live on the laurels of your first album or your first work and carry on doing that. One artist who comes to my mind is Madonna. Madonna has constantly reinvented herself. A.R. Rahman also has constantly reinvented himself. So there are some artists who have constantly reinvented themselves and come up with newer, fresher sounds. And
is there anybody in the last year, in the last few months, somebody new, somebody young, whose sound you heard for the first time and you said, that's amazing, I've not heard something like this before?
Yeah, the composer I mentioned, Ludwig Göransson, he's absolutely amazing. Then another Hollywood score composer, a person called Steve Jablonski, he's amazing. Now, another issue that we can talk about is basically nowadays, because of the way that music is consumed, like for example in streaming, music has become a very volatile medium in terms of if the first 3 to 5 seconds does not capture your imagination, then that song is not given a chance. So in the past you had songs which had longer intros, like for example November Rain, or even older Hindi songs which had long instrumental intros, like the songs in Lamhe or any of the Yash Raj films of the yesteryears. Now those songs will never become successes today. Because
why is that? Is it because of the attention economy? I mean, people are consuming 1-minute reels and so on and so forth.
So I don't think people's attention has come down because people are enjoying films which are 3 hours long.
Correct.
They're enjoying Dhurandhar, which is 4 hours long.
Absolutely.
So people's attention hasn't come down, but the way that people are consuming music is on Spotify and on YouTube, where if you have the song that you're actually listening to and then you have 10 related videos right next to it. So if the first 3 or 4 seconds does not get your imagination, you're just very tempted to hit that. But if you are in a captive environment, like in a movie theater, then that does not apply. So people's attention spans have not come down. In fact, people's attention spans have gone up.
So what does that do to you as a composer? Are you always under pressure to have your best sort of set right at the first 10 seconds or the first 30 seconds of every song?
Luckily, I don't have a record label breathing down my neck, nor do I have a filmmaker breathing down my neck for a Bollywood film. So I'm making music based on my own sensibilities. So I not only make long intros, but I make entire instrumental tracks, you know. So that's the idea, because I believe that if it's music that you yourself love, because I always believe that the musician is the first audience of their own track.
Correct.
So if I am my first audience and I love my music, then I'm sure that I'll find at least a few people who will agree with me, rather than shooting in the dark. Like if you look at any other art form, like if you look at Vincent van Gogh, when he was making a new painting, I cannot imagine him going to all the neighboring art galleries and saying, okay, what is everybody doing, you know, let's make something like that. He would dig deep into his own life and figure out what, and create something that is a piece of him. And even if I wanted to know what kind of a person he was, I would not read a book about him. I would probably look at all of his paintings and judge what kind of a person he was. So I believe that it should be the same with music. Whereas in India, what's happening is that every song is either an item song or that is a party song, or it is a love song. There are only two kinds of music. But there are so many issues in India. There are so many things to celebrate about India. There is so many things to talk about India. Why aren't we writing songs on that, you know? And I believe that history should be chronicled through music. And that's not happening.
What about going back to sounds of nature? And you do that very well, of course, through your music. But somehow there's always a reluctance for commercial music to, you know, go back to our roots, use the sounds of nature, use the sounds of our culture, our festivals, and so on. Is that purely because it's commercially not sellable, or?
No, I don't think it's commercially not sellable. I believe that it's just that it's decades and decades of propaganda that the more Indian you are, the less educated you are, you know, or the less cooler you are. If you look at Bollywood films for many, many years, the guy wearing the kurta pajama and playing the sitar is the uncool person, and the person playing the electric guitar is the cool person. Like there's so many ad films where the guy playing the tabla is like the uncool person, and the guy playing the drums is the cool person. So I guess that is the reason why, you know, that.
But are you seeing a change in that in the last few
There's
years?
a huge shift. There is a massive shift right now, where I see a lot of friends' children who want to learn the sitar, they want to learn the bansuri, and they want to learn Indian classical music, because they understand that learning Indian classical music can be so beneficial in a career of music, because you learn how to improvise, you learn the overall extent of what music can do as a powerful language. So I believe that that is changing right now.
So as a creative person, as an artist, as a brand ambassador, you've also sort of set an example on issues that matter to you. For example, you've talked about, you know, re-wearing clothes and making it in a sustainable sustainable way and so on. I believe you've worn the same Grammy Sherwani to some 60
concerts.
concerts.
And even this jacket, this suit, if you go and scroll on my Instagram, you'll see it in at least 30 pictures.
Okay. So you're not under pressure that celebrities have, that every time you are in a public function, you have to show up in a new designer couture. You don't believe in that? And
No, I don't. Because this whole paradigm of every picture on Instagram needs to be a different costume, I think we need to do away with that, because having sustainable fashion is one thing, which is very good, sustainable materials and sustainable fabrics. But I believe that it needs to go beyond that, and much, much beyond that, where you buy good quality clothes and you rewear them multiple times. Because even from a finance point of view, I believe that the most expensive clothes that you ever buy are the ones that you wear only once. So,
like your wedding dress, right? I mean, you wear that only once, hopefully. But why hasn't that seeped in, and particularly with this generation, because they're always on social media, they're on Instagram, they always want to appear cool in a new outfit. So your message, how does that resonate with this generation?
It does resonate with some people, and we are trying to build on it. So it's resonating more and more. But at the same time, there's a lot of peer pressure when it comes to young people. They need to constantly look good. They need to constantly get validation from social media, and they believe that the way to get validation is to constantly look different and constantly look cool. So, and that can happen because fashion can always be fashionable more than once. There are many ways to style the same garment multiple times and in different ways and with new flavors. So I believe that we can be far more responsible to our planet if we rewear our clothes, because the earth does not remember what we wore for our last party, but the earth definitely remembers how you treated it.
So how do you? I mean, I find this a fascinating sort of contradiction, if you will. On the one hand, the younger kids today, the Gen Z as they are referred to, are very, very passionate about climate, about mitigation of the disastrous effects of climate change and so on and so forth. And yet at the same time, as you said, there is this peer pressure to look different, appear different. How do you reconcile these two?
So this contradiction has existed since the beginning of time, because
so it's not just this generation.
I don't think it's this generation, but in different ways it has manifested itself in previous generations too, even in our generation, because we constantly talk about changing the world, but we very rarely talk about changing ourselves. And that's not because we're bad people or we're evil people. It's simply because we have not we do not believe that that the small tiny incremental changes that we can make within our own lives actually matter. Because we believe that if I stop using single-use plastics, what difference will it make? Or if I rewear my clothes, what difference will it make? Or if I'm compassionate to people, what difference will it make? But that's all that matters, because we just need to make those small tiny incremental changes, and sometimes even just bother about what we are doing ourselves, and be the change, as they say.
So when you see, everything that's happening around you in terms of young people coming together, wanting to change the system, and asking for answers, etc. Again, I come back to that point about how, on the one hand, they're always chastised for being very selfish and peer pressure and all of that, and yet at the same time, everybody seems to be investing their hope in this young generation. So how do you bridge that gap?
So I believe that when it comes to young people, I believe that young people have got a lot of dreams, they've got a lot of aspirations, and right now it's a very confusing time, the times that we're living in, because we are at a cusp of so many different technologies and so many different political ideologies and religious ideologies. Everybody's just trying to find their footholding in the kind of society that they are in, but or the kind of environment that they are in. So I believe that the aspirations need to coincide with the opportunities, and if there is a mismatch between opportunities and aspirations, then that can spell trouble. And I believe that we need to constantly have this conversation, because if you're banking on the youth for everything, not only for selling India to the rest of the world, to showcase that India is the best place to hang out in or to do our businesses in, or for me as a musician to sell my tickets, So the thing is that we have to have that conversation, that the aspirations of the youth has to match with the opportunities provided to them.
So where do you think that gap is, and how can that gap be bridged?
That is something for a much more wiser person than me. But I would say that...
But let's say in your field, for example.
Yeah, in my field, I think that what I'm doing is that I constantly have auditions. I constantly try to motivate the youth when it comes to getting into musical careers, because I believe that just the traditional career path is not enough nowadays. One needs to encourage career paths within the arts and, of course, entrepreneurship and various other things.
How easy is it to break into music in this day and age, in 2026?
I think it's very easy if somebody has got the skin for it, because a lot of parents and a lot of children come to me and they tell me that, you know, I want to have a career in music. What should I do? And my answer is sometimes very rude to them that, you know, because...
Go back and study.
No, because the children sometimes, no, not that.
Okay.
But sometimes the kids come to me and they tell me that my parents are very strict. How do I convince them, you know, to take up a career in music? So my answer to them is that if you are not able to convince your parents, then how the hell are you going to be able to convince 1 billion people that you're a good musician? So no matter how strict your parents are, no matter how backward or perceivably backward your parents are in their thinking, you have to be able to convince your parents, and you have to show that leadership ability to do that. Because if you're not able to do that, you will not have the skin to get into this career where where you are your own boss, you know.
So that's your advice to young people.
So I tell them that you have to have the ability to be able to convince your parents. And if your parents are unconvincible, then you have to have the ability to go against them, you know.
Wow.
So that is what, and successfully go against them. So that's going to be really important. Only then you'll be able to have a successful...
Which you kind of did with your folks, right?
Yeah, like half and half.
Half
you know?
and half, all right.
I kept them happy, but at the same time I rebelled.
Went against them. Thank you very much for this fascinating conversation, Ricky Kej, and many congratulations and best of luck for all your future endeavors. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.